time pressure today, so I'm going to, it's 1:02 already. I'm just going to say the next apps and tools call is scheduled for February 24th, and the ontology call, next ontology call is scheduled for March 10th, all available on the DirtSpace Wiki. And with that, I'm going to give presenter privileges to Violetta because she has an engagement that she has to leave early for. So I want to make sure that we get to hear about all the cool Northwestern extensions. And then as soon as she's done, if we have time, and if we don't, it's
Can
okay.
you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Have at it.
Paul, are we waiting for Paul? Paul is not. I just talked to him on the phone. He's not connected yet.
We can give another minute if you'd like.
Yeah. Basically, I just want to wait because, yeah, there he is. Because Paul has amazing data set from the lattice grid, lots of detailed information. I would have, I mean, really, this is amazing data set that he has. I'm not kidding. And of course, that's understandable that he doesn't want to lose any of that data. So we decided, because some of the publication types that are brought in from National Library of Medicine, I mean, according to the National Library of Medicine, they are in PubMed, right? So some of them are not, we just couldn't find how to represent them with the existing ontologies that are in the VIVO app. And some we found that they exist like classes in Fabio, but are not brought in the VIVO. Maybe we can advocate now with Paul for those classes to be brought in. So let's see, we started very funny with one document, Word document here, having all the publication types. So he has addresses, and for that we're going to use speech, right? And there is also autobiography, bibliography, biography, case reports. They don't exist, and probably understandable because I don't know if you know, but the the catalogers also, the term list for publication types also uses those autobiography, bibliography, biography. So I had nothing against adding those like separate classes. But for example, classical article, according to the examination we did with Paul, classical article is actually an academic article. Clinical conference is an article, so that already exists. Clinical trial, of course, already exists. There is not only a control clinical trial, which is different than all the other clinical trials from the OBO and the subclasses, phase 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we added a control clinical trial. And as you can see, these are some of the stuff that we marked and color-coded what we want to do and what we don't want to do. So I'm not gonna, these are two, retraction of publication and technical report that exist in Fabio, but they are not in the VIVO app. And we would really like to see that because I know many people appreciate the information, especially if some publication, there is a retraction of that publication and that information has to be brought in. And as I said, Paul already has this amazing data. So knowing all of this, I started by getting the things in Protege, the same way I was doing the ontology for Texas A&M, except that now we added additional classes, subclasses. Like for example, as you can see, I'm gonna put that down. Autobiography, bibliography, subclass of document, biography, and case reports. Class annotations, let me see, maybe we can see. This is the view, the RDF XML export, serialization of the ontology. And I wanted to show you this because this will show us this will show us, come on, the definitions we use. According to National Library of Medicine, a work consisting of books and articles. So we added all these descriptions to the ontology.
Very cool.
Oh my gosh, I have so many windows open. So maybe it's useful to show actually what that looks like in the site admin from in the VIVO application. I asked Paul to remove all those almost 70,000. Paul, was it 70,000 publications that you had? So this from
It's
the
67,000 something. Yeah.
60. Okay, I was close. Because of, remember guys how you notice in TED and that we are missing the letter prefix to some of the entities, so we decided to start from scratch. Plus we're gonna have to show all of this to the Paul's bosses and my boss, and we wanted to make sure it's right. So for example, case report or comparative study, which one you want to see? Okay, comparative study. It's very different. I talked to Christy, I talked to a few other people, and it looks like it's different than a clinical trial that already exists in the OBA ontology. So that's why we decided to extend it. And you can, all of you probably know that you can edit it directly here. So we add the description for anyone that comes later on. It's under a class group of research because we want to display it under research. And the superclass, we added a link to the superclass clinical trial. Same as the other, like clinical trial has these other subclasses. You can see phase 1 clinical trial, 2, 3, 4, and also the one from our local ontology. So I don't know if I'm sounding clear or not, but that's one example, clinical trial.
Quick question. This is
Yeah.
Patrick West with RPI.
Mm-hmm.
Those were subclasses in the clinical trial?
Yeah.
Was there a reason you chose to do subclasses rather than instances? Oh, I'm sorry. Never mind. I get it now. Sorry. Phase 0 clinical trial. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
sorry.
they're different. So.
Yep, I gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So let me see. Lost my train of thought. So the other class. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going this way. The other classes that we added, autobiography is kind of obvious what that is, even though I'm not very happy adding this, because autobiography can be a book, right? So it can be a subclass of a VIVO book, or it can be an article or a news release, or newspaper article. It can be many things. It can be subclass under many things. But in our case, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, we decided that this is, yes, just directly under document VIVO. Superclass is a document VIVO, so we added it like that. So in our case, you can see that under document VIVO, we have all these subclasses like autobiography, even the bibliography, and biography also belong here. And also the case reports that we added, they also belong here as subclasses of document. And the rest, you probably all have the same. So I don't know what are your thoughts on this, guys, but because it was very clear for us that we don't want to lose this kind of data that already exists, and we wanted to map it correctly. So, for example, directory is another thing that didn't exist, and it's obviously a subclass of database, and I'm really not sure, why that didn't exist. So we added a link to the superclasses both. There is database in OBO and VIVO. So please let me know if this is wrong, if I just need to make a link to one of these superclasses. But according to what we saw, I think it's going to be good for now to link it like this. And just to mention, directory is one of those that exist in Fabio also, but was not brought in the VIVO application. So that's why we needed to add this. And you can see the explanations here. What am I? Evaluation study. I forgot what that was, but probably the definition will tell me. There was nothing that would fit from the ontologies, so we added this. Basically, it's like a subclass of academic article. It's a special type of study that is academic. It's a peer review article, and that's why we put it like a subclass of academic article. So if you see something else that you want to know, like case reports, let me know. I can show that too. Like this is directly a subclass of document VIVO. Clinical presentation. This is according to National Library of Medicine. It's a clinical presentation that may be followed by evaluative studies that eventually lead to a diagnosis. So we couldn't find anything. And please, anybody that has more experience, let me know if we missed something. But we just couldn't find anything that fits this description and this kind of outputs, scholarly outputs. So we added that. And the data type properties that belong here, basically unique identifiers. As you can see, it's again, I'm gonna comment the unbelievable data set from Lattice Grid. They have just, I'm not kidding, it was just a pleasure to look at all these tables and various such granularity in data that really needs to be preserved. They have like something I didn't have at XSNM. We had just departments and it or organization, everything was one thing in one place. There was no granularity like this department belongs to this college or this center belongs to under this college or nothing like that. Here at Northwestern at the Feinberg School of Medicine, the data from Lattice is just unbelievable. And also what Paul wanted to add is like, for example, this full author list, that's something that comes from PubMed. So we have the full author list of all the authors of that publication. It doesn't matter if it's coming, the affiliation is Northwestern or not. At least here we're gonna find all of them. We also, and mesh terms, another unbelievable data from the Lattice grid. For all the publications, there is mesh terms. So Paul can go in later and explain exactly what that means. But I mean, who would wanna lose that data if you already have it? So it just belongs under.
So Violetta, this is John at Cornell. Why would you not link that data to, use the external linkage capability in VIVO to actually link to the Stony Brook mesh term URI?
Yes.
Is this a way to just bring them in and hold them locally until you do that kind of matching, or?
This is, I think, temporarily, because that's what we wanted. We didn't want it. It's a free text, and it's all in one column. You know what I mean? So it's very difficult data to work with. Like, for example, you can see everything belongs under one.
Right.
All of them are slumped together. So Paul is going to have to do much more work to to do what you suggested. So for now, we're going to keep it like this. But that was something that, yeah, that's going to take, I don't know, is that going to be complicated to do? Probably will be.
Well,
so, yes, I'm asking you, John.
Well, the problem is you may have, sometimes the label of the mesh term, sometimes, it's a parsing problem and so forth. But I think it makes a lot of sense to have a local property to store that list, and something like the author list. There'd be a question about whether we want that in the VIVO ISF. The full author list, for example, how is that formatted? Is that formatted with last name, comma, first name, or is it first name, last name, or, so you'd have to, that's a useful thing to have and very practical and makes a lot of sense, particularly when you have it in data or get it from a source like PubMed.
There you go.
But it's formatted text, so if you shove it in an ontology property, you've got to understand that it's that it's not sort of structured data. But.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But for now, because especially because we still don't know how we're gonna connect and map the outside collaborators, we decided to do that.
Yeah, no, it's a very practical solution, and I think I think it's ideal for a local ontology, local extension to do that kind of thing.
Okay, maybe now it's time for Paul to take over. There is no more.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Are you ready, Paul?
Yes, I am. I just need to take the GoToMeeting controls, show my screen. Let me just make certain that I'm on the right page, and I will show my screen. Hello. Can everybody see what I am seeing?
Nubic R2RML Karma.
Yes, that's the name of the project right now. We're going to be renaming this. Initially, this was forked from Violetta's work at Texas A&M. You can see that we actually even kept the Texas A&M files under the TAMU directory. Probably get rid of that, but maybe not.
No.
Yeah. Probably not. We have it over there. Somebody asked in the chat window whether or not we have whether this is in GitHub or specifically the Northwestern.
Oh gosh, yes, I forgot to mention that. It's either here under this one or yeah, under my GitHub. Sorry, guys.
So the latest version of the ontology is under the OWL directory. We have the current one is the local vlocal RDF, which is the one that Violetta was showing in her editor. And we have a description here of the classes that we have extended and some of the local data properties that we are using. So that's here on GitHub. Also here we are using Karma. So here are the mapping files for use in Karma with links to Karma, link to Lattice Grid, and what we have in Lattice Grid is a number of tasks to export the raw data into CSV files for import into Karma, and then go through these mappings to the ontologies. The raw data tables are these 5 that we're currently using. There are several others that we are going to be going through, but just for initially to get at least the faculty, their appointments, the publications, and their authorships together in the data. These are the 5 tables we're working with currently. In this, right here is a description of what if a table goes to more than one class, which classes those are done. We actually have more than these right now, but we were just working with a subset of the Lattice Grid data just for speed and purposes in order to just map them correctly, and a decent enough subset so that we're confident that when we pull in and map all of the data, it'll be correct. So as Violetta was saying, that we are able to break these into these 7 different types of documents. We also break down our organizational units into 3 different department organizational unit types. And then, of course, behind here, underneath this part, is a list of the attributes that we have in the raw data and how they're mapped to the ontology. So in this list, you can see that there's the table name, so that's the direct table name. The class that it's extracted to, as you can see that there's several for abstracts. And I'm going to just scroll quickly down to show something that is a one-to-one. We have the table in Lattice Grid as an investigator appointment that just becomes a position in there. The table column is what is extracted in our export. We have it so that since we're about to be using symplectic elements for a lot of our data, we have it extracted into with their column headers being the names of what is desired by symplectic. But we don't have actually pagination start pages, the column in the data table. This is the column from the extract, really. And then, of course, what this is mapped to. Volume, of course, is the VIVO volume type, but publication type is our local Medline category, which we have saved, even though it's kind of a one-to-one to the class, because that's what we're determining for which classes are going to be imported or ingested. You can see that there is, so when we go to the wrong, oh, yeah, it's fine. When we go here, then of course you can see that these are broken down into their particular classes. We'll go with the evaluation study, only one here. but we can, once we go in here, we have the full author list. This is the one that is taken from PubMed. And we can also see that only one of the authors are a faculty member here in the application. Pan, Du, and Simon Lin have since left the university, so we don't have their faculty records any longer. We'll be going through and doing something to create records for them here. Because they are authors, but initially we'll just go with the work with the investigators with whom we know. What else is here? Well, let's just go to the view all. Medline categories again. This is the when we do the PubMed through what is called BioRuby is the gem that we use. There's a Medline section there that we can just extract those bits there. Here is the list of mesh terms, semicolon separated, and we'll figure out a way to hook those into Stony Brook or have some sort of mesh concept here. Gosh, what else do I have? I think. Really, I don't know what else to show here.
Do we have any questions? I just want to say thank you for putting that stuff up at GitHub, plus taking all that time to document it. It was pretty fantastic.
Actually, the documentation helps me more than anybody else, so thanks, Violetta.
Sorry, I missed that. What did you say? I drifted.
When I can't have a chance to talk to Violetta, I can read what she has written, and it makes perfect sense. My documentation is not as good. There are little notes. I mean, obviously for me, like, oh, for the export files, look at the export rake file task in LatticeGrid, so then I can just click on that and read the code here about where what and actually this is kind of interesting, somewhat. If anybody's interested, here's how we map the what is expected in symplectic to what we have the column in the data table. And then, of course, here is the list of distinct publication types that we have from Medline, and then we can map them to these. The classes are on the left, whereas the actual what we get from Medline is on the right, and you can see how what we were saying is so for everything that's under the clinical trial, we have when it's just one or several introductory journal article, capitalized journal article, classical article. All of these are just academic articles in that sense. So all those are just grouped together when we import the academic articles. And as you can see over here, the academic articles clearly a lot more than any of the others for the 4 authors that we have chosen to work with. We chose these 4 authors because they've all worked with one, and several have worked together, and some are outliers that haven't worked with, have only worked with the one. So it seems to be a decent enough subset to go to able to be import quickly.
So there was a comment in the chat that said Suzanne was saying that she remembered someone on the last call saying something about putting in an end date in people's appointments and something nice happens, but she says I can't remember. Oh, I think that was probably because that was our talk about local extensions for current entity where we put in end dates for when people weren't current.
Yeah, the VIVO application will, from the organization side, will no longer show connections to people when the end date and the position is in the previous year or earlier. So it's just an application thing.
Paul, this is Alex with a quick question on Paul and Violetta. I was just wondering, in your work with LatticeGrid, have you ever in the past taken a look at the visualizations that are part of the Profiles RNS open source application?
No.
Okay. Yeah. No, I was just wondering because they so that's another research networking application that uses PubMed and mesh terms heavily, and so I'm just kind of curious. If you haven't taken a look, I think the Harvard version is probably the best in terms of the use of those, but the UCSF profiles is also pretty good in its use of the mesh data. I'd be interested to hear what you thought if you ever have a chance to take a look at those visualizations to see if they're interesting to your work with LatticeGrid.
Oh, certainly. Actually, I did want to point that out or mention that LatticeGrid really is just an intermediary of other data sources. So the export is just convenient for us right now. It's not necessary with most of the other files to other parts of the of work that we've done is not necessarily tied to LatticeGrid. So as long as obviously the data export from whatever resource just has that mapping to our mapping files, those can be loaded in.
So Patrick West asked on the chat, what's the URI for the ontology?
Well, it's not public, but you can look at it on Git. I mean, we're gonna have to eventually put it in a namespace because, as you know, we are still not live. It's all behind firewall. So.
And that's Nubic, N-U-B-I-C, was it?
I just
yes.
There's
and
that
there is
one.
in the chat.
Thank you.
Find it either that or on my Git.
And I have another. I'll put both in there. They're also in the notes, but
yeah. It was fun actually making this extension. So, and I had trouble saying no to all of this. You can see now because I'm not presenting. But for example, there is so much granularity in the data from LatticeGrid. Like they have the publish erratum, review, research support, like multi-center study, meta-analysis, lectures. I mean, it's just unbelievable stuff.
And I believe that is all. Oh, I believe that's all again in this export right here. Yeah.
So I have
Violetta and Paul, I have a question. So, and I love how Violetta says Fabio, by the way. That's awesome. Fabio.
Exactly, Fabio.
When you were picking domain classes for some of these, especially between Fabio and Vivo, did you ever find yourselves having to try and decide, were there any that you could have picked the same type from either one?
Yeah, definitely.
How did you, what kind of reason, I think that's what really people want to know, like, what reasoning did you kind of put behind some of your domain classes that you wanted to pick?
Oh.
This is the general guideline. Could you give me a guideline? You know what?
Okay, now I'm gonna use the cataloger's, it's cataloger's judgment call, You kind of said, I really don't know how to explain this, but I'm coming from cataloging world and knowing all these types of publication and then seeing how National Library of Medicine is confusing them with genre types. I mean, it's a total disaster. So I wanted to make it, a little less complicated, even though I'm really not happy extending so much. Like you can see, I decided going over with the examples with Paul, we decided all this introductory journal article or journal article, classical article, and English abstract. I mean, that's all, you see, Paul is showing now here. That all goes under article. It's all academic article. It's all published in peer review journals. So there is no reason to add additional classes if you're publishing your scholarly output in a peer review it's going to be an academic article or a conference proceeding, or you know what I mean? If anything that goes through a peer review, you're going to have to put it under there. So I don't know, maybe being a cat coming from this world, being a librarian helps a little. I don't know.
So did you find any other domain classes that you were working on? Like, so how about the clinical trial things? Those weren't
clinical trial exists, they already exist, and subclasses, but what didn't exist is a control clinical trial, which is a different clinical trial than the ones that exist, like phase 1, phase 2, 3, and 4. So that's why we needed to add that.
Yeah, this particular what's showing on the screen is one version behind. The most recent has the clinical trial phase 1, phase 2 broken down, so they have
separating out a randomized controlled trial from a regular phase 1 clinical trial.
I didn't get that, Chris. Can you repeat that?
So you guys have a distinction between a randomized controlled trial and a phase 1 clinical trial?
Yes. Is that wrong?
Well, you could have a randomized controlled trial that's also a phase 1 clinical trial.
Well, I don't know. They exist separately in National Library of Medicine.
Interesting.
Yes. Maybe I can share that link with all of you. Let me just find it. So I can put the link over here so you can see all the publication types. Not all of them need to, of course, exist, but you can look at it on this link. So that's what I'm saying. We went through this and through our data set and examples, and we really spot checked everything. What does it mean? So, for example, I really want to have a directory because, exists in Fabio, but not in the version we have in the VIVO app. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then also dictionary exists as a concept scheme in Fabio with subclasses, discipline dictionary and term dictionary, but they're not in the VIVO app, so we cannot use them. So I would want to see us bring those in the next, VIVO version.
Right.
And as I already mentioned, retraction of publication and technical report, which is different than any other reports out there, and exist in Fabio, we need to bring those in. Or I'm going to make an extension.
Well, I think it's fantastic that you guys did this much due diligence in making your local extensions. I don't know if we've done that much due diligence. We usually create them because we have data that we can't model, and we just like, this would be easier. So
you need a librarian. You need a cataloger over there.
So that's pretty awesome.
Thank you. Okay, now your turn, Chris.
Yeah, Chris, I'm going to stop showing my screen now.
Sure, I'll do something real quick. It occurred to me that you guys, I wish I'd have known or thought about it before I went to all the trouble of making some examples, because I'm going to use their ontology in my example. So there was a question on a call, I think the last call or 2 calls ago, someone wanted to know what the implications were of adding and removing an ontology from VIVO. And so what I've got here is a VIVO vagrant. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Ted Lawless's virtual machine, but I put it in the notes. You can go to GitHub, and there's a great set of instructions, and you can follow the instructions, and you can pretty much get a 1.7 VIVO to experiment with. And that's kind of out of scope for this talk, so just suffice it to say I have one. And you can see here, localhost. So I'm going to go here, and in the site admin section, in the add remove RDF data tool, there's an option to add mixed RDF instances or ontology. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the add and I'm going to go create class subgroups automatically. And then I'm going to put in the RDF file for vlocal for the ones they just showed us. So somebody had asked earlier, how do I take a look at these because I want to experiment with them and play with them. And one thing is you could look at them in a text editor, or you could spin up a Vagrant and you could look at them in a VIVO. And voila, I go to ontology list, I now have vlocal. And I can
Yay, good for you.
That's so awesome, Chris.
And I can go in and I can go and say, hey, controlled clinical trial, what's that all about? Oh, Violetta's thing. So it's something to play with. And then I think to show you how to get rid of it when you're like, I don't want those anymore at all, you click remove and you supply it with the same RDF file.
Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Yes, somebody.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
And then when you go to the ontology list, Violetta's stuff is all gone. Someone had a question.
Chris.
Yes.
Yeah. So what exactly means this check mark that you selected to create the groups? What does that means in the page that you imported?
Sure. Let me go back here to this where it is. I'll do this again. And I'll
create class
create
group
class groups. Yeah. What that means?
That's a great question that I know that Brian or John are going to help me out with. I'm assuming that if there are classes that need to get created that don't exist, it's going to go ahead and create those classes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what will be the heuristics to create those classes?
This is Brian. So that checkbox for the class groups is actually, it's not doing anything with ontology classes. That's purely for setting up the organization in the display. So if you go and click on the site admin screen for a second, over on your left-hand side, there's going to be a listing of the class groups. And so if you bring that up, that will show you the organization that the individual display pages use to group the different properties together, or sorry, to group the classes together when you're browsing. And so properties is the property groups. It's a similar concept, but so there's these groups like people, activities, other things like that are just used to be able to break down the display into more manageable chunks instead of just having a big list of all of the classes in one fell swoop. So when you click that checkbox when you're uploading an ontology, it was originally put in there more for if you're using a plain vanilla Vitro and there's no ontology to begin with at all, and you just want to bring some content in and have it be able to display in some kind of reasonable manner, that if you click that box, it'll go through and take all of the top-level classes and make a group that has the same name as that class. So when you go to the index page and look at the things on the index, you'll see them grouped underneath each of the top-level classes. And so if you're loading something into a VIVO where you've already got the VIVO class groups, then you probably don't really need to click that box. And in fact, you might not really want to click that box because it'll add in extra things into your index that you probably don't really want to see. But yeah, that's what it's for. It's for organizing things on the index and grouping things visually so that they make more sense. But it doesn't have anything to do with the actual ontology classes themselves.
Yeah, but this is kind of related with the question that I would like to make to Violeta, because when they pointed to the GitHub, to their GitHub, they show a page that lists the class of their ontology, their extension, and some of them are connected or display something related with these group classes. So I wonder if they consider these parts of their ontology, or it's a separated file to specify what group classes a class should be member of.
Oh, well, when you examine, for example, like bibliography, for example, or biography like I had, they show up where Brian was explaining now. under class group, they show up under research. But biography, for example, is under class group research.
Yeah, but you had to specify that, right? You had to say that, right? It's something
yes,
that
I have
when
to
you,
say that.
Exactly. And when you say that, you put this information, this statement inside your ontology or in a separate file.
No separate file, in the same file. And I also put the link to a superclass. In this case, for example, for biography, is going to be linked to a superclass document VIVO from the VIVO ontology.
I see. So it makes your file kind of connected or more useful for VIVO application and not it's not an extension of a VIVO data model as people try to sell now, that we have this data model independent of the application and then we have the VIVO ontology for the VIVO application. So it's more tiny to VIVO ontology for the VIVO application.
Yeah, I think.
Well, of course, it's going to work in.
Oh, go ahead, Violetta. I was just going to say that when I made my sample one, I related my exempt organization to the domain class of organization. And when I click the box, create class subgroups automatically, when I go to organizations, my exempt organization showed up. So I wanted to make sure that my data and my class that I created was linked at a top level and also showed up in that section. I think that's the best way I can explain it. Suzanne had a question about when to choose that, and I would say I have yet to see any problems with clicking it. I guess when do you not want to click it is if you didn't want for example, if you didn't want the organization ontology elements you're adding to show up in this organization section, you would then not click it. And then Suzanne had a question about when to choose a file. So I did something fancy and I just put them up on GitHub because I wanted to show that you could do that to encourage people to do that. But you can also, I think I have this on my desktop. You can also do this from a local file. Where did I put it? There it is. Where is it? There it is. And then ontologies. York.
I'm going to leave you guys. Bye.
Okay, Violetta, thank you. So here's a local file, Suzanne, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to say add, create class groups automatically, and added 32 statements. Now if I go to organizations, it might not be indexed yet. But what I can do is
alert from calendar.
Oh, sorry, my calendar.
Clinical and translational science on top.
Sorry about that, guys. All right, so I will go back here and I will add some data as well. And up on GitHub, I put some sample data for my little sample ontology here. And upload that. Now here, I've got an exempt organization. Yay! And now I've got that. And you can see Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. And they've got one property, their EIN. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, so Chris, if you go back to your index page, Chris, this is Brian. Can you hear me?
Yep, I got you. I went back to the index page.
Oh, okay. I don't see it yet. So you go to the index where you have the list of classes there. So next to the site admin, or maybe my screen's behind. So yeah, the link right to the left of that.
Oh, index. Yes.
So by clicking that Create Class Groups box,
right,
what it did is it created that big heading there that says Exempt Organization, which
cool.
in this case is makes sense because you don't have any other kinds of organizations in your system. But if you were already using, if you already had data here where you already had the organization class group that comes bundled with VIVO, if that were already showing up with data underneath it, and you did that upload of the new class with the box ticked, then it would look a little bit strange because you'd have this big heading of organizations, then you'd have another big heading next to it that says exempt organization, with that single class in that one class group where you really want the exempt organization class to be in the existing organizations class group. So that would actually be an example. If that were the case, you really wouldn't have wanted to click that box because you would want to just load the ontology class by itself, and then you would go edit that class manually and say, I want this to be in the organizations class group, and then it would show up in the list with all of your other organization types.
Got it. See, there's the right explanation. I said it wrong before. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, so it's a very dumb tool. That box, it has no way of knowing when you upload a bunch of classes in the new ontology. It has no way of knowing what existing group those things naturally want to belong in. So all it can do is create new ones. So if you're already using a VIVO that's got all of your other data in it, you probably just want to load new ontologies without that box ticked. And then you just have to go through and manually assign each of those classes that you've uploaded into the appropriate class, depending on where you want to see it show up on that index page.
Ah, gotcha. So one other quick thing I wanted to show, and hopefully this will help some people, is that I was able to export my ontology out of here after I fiddled with it. So let's say I went in here and I added, I was editing this and I added a new class or data type or whatever. There's this button in here under the ontology control panel. So let me show you that again. So under site admin, ontologies list, my ontology, and then export ontology. And so I don't know the difference between abbreviated and the other one. They don't seem to be different to me, but I always pick this one. And I'm able to export it out and save it. And I've been able to then take this file and fiddle with it and change a description or change the actual name. And then I've been able to go in and delete it and re-add it, and it shows up with the new description or the new name. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but some people like me that might want to use a text editor to fiddle with things, you can also export it. I've been playing around with exporting it as TTL or as Turtle, which has these things grouped together and a little bit more human readable. And I was able to fiddle with some of these elements, specifically just descriptions and names at this point. I haven't added any properties or classes this way, but I can't imagine it wouldn't take them if you wanted to do it, as long as you had all the right definitions. But again, this is also one of the things we do for our local extensions to keep them in a Git repository. So.
But when you want to load it again, Chris, you use the admin interface, or you save it in the file graph directory?
No, when I want to load it again, I go back here and I go to add remove RDF and I go add. And I choose the file. So far I've deleted it out before I've added it. I haven't added over top of it. So the first thing I did was I would go in and I would remove it. Remove the previous version, and then I'd add the new one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that brings up a good point, though, that sort of as a companion to this demonstration, we might want to think about in a future call also showing how the file graphs work, because that's the other way of bringing ontologies or bringing data into VIVO. If you don't want to ever, if you don't have any need to ever edit it in the GUI and you just want to have it in a file on your file system, you can just have it load when VIVO starts. You can just load a file directly from your file system and manage everything there. If you want to do editing in a text editor, or replace it with a new version and just drop it onto your file system, you can load it that way. And so we might want to think about showing that too, because depending on what you're doing and how you want to maintain these external ontologies, both of those methods are potentially useful.
So Brian or Alexander, or both of you, would you like to do that in a month?
For sure, I think Brian is the guy to do that, right?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
I mean, I'm using a lot this file graph, but I'm still making this kind of questions because I want to understand how the community is using the tools and which are the best way to use in this kind of situation. So I think Brian could give us a good overview of which approach was better for each situation.
So cool. So next call, we'll be able to see how to load an ontology on the file graph, right?
Sure, yep.
Awesome. Yes, I think that would be hugely. I mean, Brian, I'm pretty sure you were on the call where we had a question about it. So I think that people would love to see how to do that. And then possibly, I don't know if typically what your methodology is, if you're using Protege to edit and then putting it on the file graph and reloading it. But people are looking for examples of how they would do that. So,
Chris, while you're on the add and remove RDF instances and/or ontology, what happens? I mean, I'm assuming something happens, but I'm just going to maybe my assumption is wrong. Say you have something like the comparative study as a record in your data, and then you remove the that local extension class. What happens that I'm assuming that that data point goes away.
It does not.
But
so that's a great question.
It does not.
So here's my experience, right? So you've seen Sloan Foundation, right? So it's in there. So I'm going to go remove the ontology. Oh, let me go back here. There we go. Remove. Oh, I take it back. Oh, how did I find it before? There it is.
Okay.
But it's removed.
So it still is an exempt organization, but we just don't know what that is.
Right. Ghost data. So this was confusing to me at first, but that's the best way to explain it, what Paul just said. So we have the data, we know it's an exempt organization, but the application has no idea what that is because we just removed the ontology. But I did experiment with putting it back, and it did find it and say, oh, I know what you are now. So let me show that, because that was kind of like, wow, okay, that worked. I'm just putting the ontology back. And
There it is.
Now it knows what it is. Yay! Which I thought was pretty cool. I was like, wow, I didn't know VIVO was that good. So I was able to go take it out and fiddle with things in the ontology and put it back, and it works. Well, that's about all I had, and I just want to thank Paul and Violetta today for giving a great talk on the local extensions. And again, if you haven't seen them, they're up at GitHub under Nubic. And if you go look at the ontology call notes, which I'll paste a link in the chat here before I hang up in case people want to grab it. I hope, Suzanne, that you don't forget all of it, but keep coming back and we'll keep answering the questions. I think it'll be a growing experience for all of us. And plus, I'm hoping that Steve, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Would you be willing to talk a little bit about maybe a couple of the extensions at Brown next time in a month?
Yeah, sure. You know, I'm always happy to talk about that stuff.
So everybody join us next month. We'll hear from Brian and Steve. and
Right.
more local extensions. The whole idea of this spring 2015 for me for the ontology calls is to really explore people explaining their local extensions so that we can help kind of as a community inform the ontology of VIVO about what people are doing and why they're doing it. So awesome. Well, thanks everybody. And the next apps and tools calls in 2 weeks, and February 24th, and the next ontology call is March 10th. So everybody have a great day. Thanks again.
Bye, everybody.